Assalamualaikum, very good morning. In this video, we'll be covering on activity diagrams, which is one of the diagrams that you normally draw together with use case diagram. What will be covered in this video is we'll be looking at the rules and the guidelines on how to draw activity diagram, and we'll be also looking at how to create this diagram. Okay, what is an activity diagram? It is actually a diagram which is a logical model. What it does is that it describes the business domain activities, meaning that it will be representing the steps taken by the user in completing a function. Okay, it is normally used in the early stage of a project. And you can imagine that this diagram is like a flow chart. So it's showing the flow of an activities, but in an object-oriented context. Alright, so the purpose of this diagram, as I mentioned just now, is to model a process or a task. When it says here business model, is actually referring from the perspective of the user. Okay, it will be capturing the logic of an operation. For example, if an operation need to be following certain rules, so activity diagram will actually try to capture that kind of information. And it is used to describe a system function that is represented by a use case. So what will happen is that based on your use case diagrams, so for each of the use case that you identify, you will come up with an activity diagram, meaning that if you have 5 use cases, so you'll be having 5 activity diagrams. Alright, so let's look at the notation used in this activity diagram. Okay, first of all, you have to represent the activities. So you'll be using this notation, which is a rectangle with rounded ends, and you label it with short, meaningful activity. And then you have this arrow, all right, arrow with an open arrowhead. Okay. And then you have, to begin your activity, you have a start state, and then you have a final state. And then along the way, when you are describing the activities, maybe there is some decision that need to be made. So maybe in the form of if-else statement. It can also be in the form of, let's say you have to do it in a repetition manner. Okay. And on top of that, because you have decision, you have to state the condition. And in this case, it is called guard condition, where it is labeled in the square brackets. So you can write down what are the conditions for that particular decision point. And then as you have learned, whenever you are preparing a use case diagram, normally you write together with that use case diagram, use case specification, right? And you notice that not only that you write the normal flow, sometimes you have the alternative flow. So one way of showing the alternative flow is by labeling the transition. Okay, and you can put the condition that is followed through that need to be followed when you are representing the alternative flow. And then you can also identify what objects involved in that in that process or in that activity, right? And you can show what are the objects involved. For example, in this case, it's dispense string, so the object related to this activity is string. Okay, and you can have a dash arrow to show the flow. Okay, from here the string is used, and then after dispense drink is completed, okay, it will produce another object which is called drink dispense. So the one that is in square bracket is optional. It is actually show the state of the object. Okay, we are not covering on the state object yet. It will be covered later on when you learn about state chart diagram. Okay, once you have identified the activities involved from start to end for one particular use case, the next thing to do is to put these activities into a swim lane. It's like when you see um, swimming competition in Olympic, right? So they normally swim in a swim lane. So what this swim lane in the activity diagram represent is that it represent the actors involved in that particular use case. Let's say you have one particular use case with 3 actors. So you will put each of them here, and for each of the activities that you already defined, you will assign the responsibility, meaning that record completion of campaign is an activity done by the campaign manager. Okay, whereas pay invoice is actually done by the client, and so on and so forth. Alright, so these are some guidelines on how to create activity diagram. Okay, first of all, you need to set the context or scope of the activity being modeled. For example, as I have mentioned just now, normally it depends on the use case diagram that you identified. So you do an activity diagram for one particular use case. So if there are 5 use cases, so there will be 5 activity diagrams. And then the next step is you identify activities and organize the activities in the order with transition. So you can actually do that by referring to your use case specification where you have identified the steps, right? So it make it easier for you to draw. And then you think about any decision that might be involved in that processes or while executing the activities. And then you identify what is the condition involved, and then you add object flows and objects. Okay, and then along the way you can identify any possible activities that can be done together at the same time. Okay, you identify what are activities that can be done in parallel, and then you add a swim lane as mentioned just now. So each one swim lane is dedicated to one particular actor. Okay, so you assign the activity to a particular actor, and after that you draw. Right, so this is an example, right, whereby there are 2 swim lanes. One is for registrar, the other one is a professor, and this is actually a use case to create a curriculum, okay, whereby once a curriculum has been created by the registrar, okay, so the next process is that the professor will select a course to teach. Okay, then after that the registrar assign the professor to this course. So it will check whether all professors has been assigned with a class. Once this is done, it will create a list of catalog of courses together with the lecturer's name. Okay, this is showing parallel activities. So 2 things can be done at the same time. So you can do it this way. And once it's ready, you can open for registration. And this activity diagram for this particular use case is N.